Hi, everyone. I'm Lily. I'm the founder and CEO of Auggie. Auggie is three different pillars. We have a very large community of parents who connect all day, every day in our mobile app. We then have a shop where we pull all of the recommendations you parents are sharing and make those discoverable. And then, like this, we do a ton of virtual events on every topic. We really like to meet parents where they are in their journey. I have a 4-year-old and also a 6.5-week-old. And I was joking with Kary and Veronica before this because we do this event a lot, and I've been largely pregnant for a lot of them. And now I'm on the other side. So I'm not far behind a lot of you, and honestly need this just as much as you do because I don't remember anything. So today we're bringing you a fantastic panel of experts to help you feel more informed, confident, and supported as you begin your starting solids journey with your baby. Whether you're just thinking that you need to start, thinking about that first bite, or already navigating early feeding and the feeding challenges that may come with it, we're here for you. So just a few housekeeping notes. Today's session will be recorded. Again, you can use the Q&A or the chat as Q&A, and I'll do my best to get into it. And on that note, let's start. And I want to have our panelists introduce themselves. So Kary, you're muted, but why don't you go first?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Kary Rappaport. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist and international board certified lactation consultant. I work for Solid Starts and was one of the founding team members who built Solid Starts up from the ground up with a passion for how little ones learn to eat and helping families support their children as they learn to eat. So I have been working in this field for over 20 years, almost exclusively with infants and toddlers who have some level of difficulty with eating or swallowing, and specifically focused in early in my career on the period of transitioning to solids and on how we help children learn to eat. I have two of my own kids who are now 9 and 13. So I have been through this with my own kids and did these same strategies that we talk about on Solid Starts in our app and that I'll talk about today with both of my children. And I could talk and talk on this topic because I absolutely love it and been doing it for a long time. So you'll have to rein me in a little bit, Lily.
I won't do that. And we're so excited to have you. You are so knowledgeable in this space. And hi, Veronica.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Veronica Marca. I'm a registered dietitian and picky eating expert. So I've been working with kids and families for 10 years and specifically working in picky eating for the last 5 years. So I run my own counseling business out of Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I have two kids, two girls, ages 6 and 9. One of them is my selective eater, and she's the one that kind of got me into working with parents because I know how stressful it can be. And I run the Instagram page or the Instagram Feeding Picky Kids. So I share a lot of information on there. And this is also something I'm very passionate about, and I'm really happy to be here.
Cool. So we'll dive right in. And this is one I'm curious about because I don't remember. But how do parents know when their baby is actually ready to start solids? And Kary, maybe if you don't mind, you'll kick it off.
Yeah, rather than looking for a specific age, which was kind of how that was done years ago, your doctor would say your baby is now 4 months or your baby is now 6 months, they're ready to start solids. The literature, the research has really showed us that what we're looking for are a set of developmental skills. And we're really looking for three main skills that show you that your baby has the skills they need to come to the table and to start safely exploring solid foods. So the three skills you're looking for are your baby's ability to sit up with some amount of support. It doesn't have to be perfectly independent sitting. They don't have to be able to sit on a flat surface and not fall over, but they do need to be able to hold their trunk and their head and their neck upright. So if they are really hunched over, rounded, their head is falling forward, or you sit them up and you're holding their hips and they sort of immediately topple over, they're probably not quite ready with sitting. But if you can hold them at the hips and they keep their body up and they have some flexibility to look around and wiggle and move around, that tells you that they're starting to be able to sit with some support, and they're probably reaching that milestone. So that's one of them, sitting with support. The second one is that they're using their arms to reach out and grab things in their environment. So once you can sit with some good support, the arms start to become a lot more mobile and excited to reach out and explore. So you should be able to put a toy in front of your baby and they can reach out with one hand or both hands, pick it up, and then bring it to their midline or to their mouth even to explore it. And they'll do the same with toys, and they'll do the same with food when they get to the table. So once they can sit up with good support and they're starting to reach out and grab things and bring it to their mouth, usually the third piece follows, which is interest. Baby starts to show a lot of interest in what you're doing at the table. So they'll start watching you eat. They'll watch the spoon or the fork move from the plate to your mouth. They'll start reaching out and trying to get at the foods that are on the table if you let them. So once baby's showing all three of those things, sitting with some good, with a little bit of support, they are reaching out and grabbing, and they are showing some developmental interest, that tells you they're ready to start exploring a wide variety of solid foods. And usually for most babies, that happens around 6 months old, but some babies it's earlier, as early as 4 months, although I've been doing this a very long time, and I'd say it's the rare baby that's showing all three of those skills at 4 months. Usually it's closer to 5 or 6 months, and for some babies, it's closer to 7 months. All of that is normal.
I love that. So it's not about the calendar, it's about the milestones and the readiness. And you've said this before, and I loved it because I didn't realize that this was a thing, but you can also hold your
I'm
child on
listening to
your
something.
lap. Oh,
Wait.
I'm gonna mute everyone. Adam, if you can mute everyone, that would be awesome.
Did mute, but I muted you as well, Lily.
Okay. Can you talk about a little bit about holding your child on your lap and if that's okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, a little bit of support to their trunk or their hips is just fine, as long as that allows them to reach out and grab and to show interest in what's in front of them. And sometimes one of the most successful places for a baby to start is in your lap, because as they sit up against your trunk and they use your body and your lap as a support system, it gives them the stability they need to start reaching out and grabbing. And it's a wonderful way for them to feel safe and to be right up at the table with you and to start participating in the meal along with you. So it doesn't have to be, again, sitting completely independently or even in a high chair. If baby is not tolerating that yet, they can go ahead and sit in your lap, which is a really nice way to get started for some families.
And Veronica, you probably work with different families all the time on this, but any words of encouragement or reassurance for parents if baby isn't showing the readiness signs?
I mean, I think what puts pressure on parents is, if a health professional or a doctor says like, okay, 4 months, you're good to go, you can start solids. There's a lot of pressure on a parent to feel like, I need to start this now, because if I don't, I'm going to be missing something. So every baby shows these signs of readiness at different stages. So anywhere between that 4 to 6 month period, sometimes even a little bit later into 6 months. And so what really matters is following those cues that your baby is giving you. So not looking at age, but really, where is your baby at? And if they're not there yet, that is okay. It's not about a race or getting there quickly. It really is about honoring when they're ready.
Got it. Yeah. And honestly, we started, I remember earlier, and what you have to do in that scenario is just deal with a mess for a longer amount of time. So don't put pressure on yourself, and you will get there. Now, there are all different feeding styles, and I feel like baby-led weaning has come up more and more over the last few years. So, Kary, do you mind kicking us off with just an overview of what exactly baby-led weaning is, and then, of course, versus purees?
Yeah, absolutely. So baby-led weaning is one style or approach to starting solids. Most people are familiar with more of what we call the traditional approach, which is baby comes to the table and you spoon feed them a sort of thin, watery puree like a rice cereal mixed with some breast milk, or a stage 1, jar of baby food. And then you slowly progress to slightly thicker purees, eventually to more lumpy purees and mashes, eventually getting to little pieces of finger food. That's the traditional approach. Baby-led weaning is sort of the it's not exact opposite of that, but it flips a lot of that on its head, in that you skip the thin, watery purees and the spoon feeding in favor of allowing baby to come to the table when they're showing those developmental readiness signs I talked about, and you start serving them the similar foods to what you are eating yourself, or the same foods where you can, or a version of those foods right from the start. So you're sort of allowing baby to self-feed, to explore food in the same way they'd explore a toy. And you're also allowing them to pick up those foods, bring it to their mouth, and learn to chew right from the start. So you're skipping baby foods. It's not that you have to skip purees. A lot of people ask about that. Well, I want to do some purees or some mashes. Is
You
that
want to
okay?
come get us in the car so you don't have to walk?
Or is that okay that we do a combo approach where we're mixing both? The reality is that it's perfectly fine to do purees or mashes with a baby-led weaning style approach. You're aiming for foods that you naturally would eat. And a lot of those foods that we naturally eat are pureed or mashes. I love soups. I love dips. I absolutely love
Yogurt.
yogurt. Exactly. Yogurt,
Yogurt.
guacamole, hummus, anything like that.
Mhm.
Those foods that are naturally occurring purees in your diet. So of course you would share those with baby. And it's also okay to mash up foods that you are serving to baby rather than serving them whole right off the bat. So that approach is just a more developmentally, I don't know. It's a more developmentally sound approach to how we are introducing foods rather than taking every baby through that progression of purees.
And at Augie, I hear about it all the time. And Veronica, I'm curious your thoughts here. People are constantly writing in our community, is my baby getting enough? It doesn't feel like they're swallowing. Can you just give us a little insight into the nutritional lens of like, how do we ensure the baby is getting enough? When we're starting solids, is it even about that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it is about more of the exposure. So I would say there's different areas that we want to look at. So there is allergen exposure, and I know we'll talk about that. So that's important when we're looking at baby's first year. And then there's certain nutrients like iron. Iron is really important as well at 6 months. But then it is also about the sensory component. So the exposure to sitting at the table with their family, to touching different foods, getting food on their face, exposure to different flavors, different textures of food. And really before, age 1, it is about that exposure.
Okay.
We really, sometimes, babies don't eat a lot in the first few months after starting solids, but I think the most important thing is also looking at their hunger and fullness cues. So reading their cues, being responsive. Some babies may want to eat 3 times a day, and some babies may be fine with 1. So I think it's important that if we try, right, if we're holding them or we're putting them in their high chair, and they're turning their head away, and they start throwing their food, then we're respecting. It's important to respect their hunger and fullness cues.
Got it. And somebody's just writing in, and Kary, you touched on this a little bit, but they said, my baby is hitting all of the milestones and cues, but my pediatrician still said to do purees and not solids. It's, of course, talk to your providers, and I don't want to put words in any pediatrician's mouth, but have you heard that in your field that some pediatricians just aren't recommending baby-led weaning?
Yeah, exactly. Some pediatricians are not recommending it for a specific baby. So maybe there is something specific to your baby's development that your pediatrician is familiar with, or something specific to your baby's nutritional needs, or the development that tells your pediatrician that you need to start with purees. But more common what we see is pediatricians just are not trained in this area of feeding infants. They don't receive training in their medical programs. They don't really receive training in their residency programs. So they are only familiar with whatever their preceptor taught them, or what they did with their own children, or what their friends have been doing around them. And they tend to recommend those things rather than understanding actual feeding development and understanding what baby-led weaning is. They'll just default to what somebody else taught them, which again is something that is worth addressing directly with your pediatrician, because I wouldn't want to say, well, this is all pediatricians and this is what's happening in this instance, if your pediatrician actually is recommending this for some specific reason to your child. So you can go ahead and ask a follow-up question like that, such as, why are you recommending purees for my child? Is there something you're seeing or something you know about their health that might suggest that they need this route? Or might suggest that they would struggle with a baby-led weaning style approach. And if they don't have a reason for that, or you can say, or is this something you recommend for all of your patients' families? And if you know that that's a recommendation they give for all of their patients' families, that might cue you in that this is not an individualized recommendation, this is a global recommendation, and that it might not apply specifically to your baby.
That makes complete sense. And then I guess a follow-up to that, and I'm seeing it in the chat a lot, but can people do a hybrid approach? So do both at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I see this all the time. I did it with my own kids. So there's, as we mentioned, there's some foods that are like naturally pureed, naturally soft. And then depending on how comfortable the parent is. So this is also something that I see in my practice is parents may not have the confidence to do a certain style, like maybe baby-led weaning, they're afraid of choking. So I think, a combo approach is absolutely fine as long as we're being responsive and offering those nutrients and giving baby that experience to be fed in a responsive way.
And when it comes to picky eaters, which I feel like, there's no one better to talk to than you on that. Baby-led weaning and like family mealtime, does it do anything to sit together to be able to cook for your baby what you're cooking for yourself that ultimately decreases the pickiness?
I mean, ultimately, as a parent myself and as parents that I talk to, our goal is to cook one meal. And I hear this all the time. I just want to cook, I want to have my kids eat what I'm eating. So if we're starting with that from the very beginning, and we're offering the same, those foods that we enjoy and we eat in front of our kids and we cook regularly, they're going to see that. And modeling is so important, especially in that stage, from starting solids, even into toddlerhood, them watching us. So it is very important and very monumental in terms of like, preventing picky eating or helping your kids learn to eat what you eat.
Let's actually get into that of like eating what you eat. And there are a bunch of questions coming in the chat about this. So let's just quickly start with salt and sugar in food, and I guess just flavors generally. Kary, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to that. Or Veronica is a dietitian. Maybe you want to get started on that one and then I'll pick it up.
Yeah, I mean, so salt, we don't recommend, any processed foods or foods with salt under the age of 1. And also, trying to minimize any sugar as well. Obviously, there's, natural sugars that occur in foods like fruit and things like that. But I think, sorry, what was the initial question? Salt, sugar, and?
Just like if you are cooking food for your family that then you want to give to your baby, should you be withholding salt at all? Is a little bit of salt okay?
We want to minimize salt as much as possible, but what we don't want to minimize is flavor. So we can still use,
like a cinnamon.
herbs. We can use olive oil. Like we can use things to make food taste good without adding too much salt or without giving our babies processed food that's very high in sodium.
And just why no salt is a question that's coming in. And then also, what about breads like sourdough bread that does have a little bit of added sugar?
So in terms of salt, it's for their kidney function.
Okay.
So we want to try to avoid that. I don't know if Kary, there's anything else you want to add?
Yeah, our team has done a deep dive into this topic because this comes up a lot. It's a hot topic in the baby-led weaning community. The reality is babies actually need some amount of salt in their diet. Breast milk contains sodium. You give babies who are in the NICU some amounts of sodium to help them function. So it is almost impossible for babies to overconsume on their own when they're self-feeding, to overconsume salt. We all have a sort of built-in stop mechanism, and infants, as they are self-feeding, especially using a baby-led weaning style approach where you're feeding them bigger pieces of food, do not have the skills to eat large amounts of foods right
Yeah.
off the bat. They are exploring almost all of it, and in a lot of cases, all of it. Every single bite gets spit back out. So what we know is avoiding salt, from according to research, is really more about establishing flavor preferences. While it, of course, if baby is being served like a highly concentrated salty broth in a bottle, they can consume a lot. There are ways that you can oversalt things and but typically developing babies have that stopping point. So if you are salting foods according to how your family typically salts foods, or even better, you're just sort of leaving some of the salt out and you're just salting your foods, and there's a little bit of salt in baby's foods, a little bit of sugar in baby's foods, for example, like the sourdough that you were talking about. The research shows us that that is perfectly fine for babies because they're not consuming large amounts. And I've been doing this a very long time, in my opinion, and Veronica, you hit the nail on the head when you said this, like the habits that you are forming by sharing your food with baby from the start, the foods that you cook your family, the foods that you yourself are eating, so far outweigh the small amount of salt or sugar baby is getting in by exploring and eating those foods, especially when we're focused on serving fresh whole foods that you're cooking yourselves. If you are a family that eats out for every meal, absolutely those recommendations will shift a little bit, because we know that restaurants tend to salt their foods quite a bit more than we would salt our foods at home. Or if you're a family that relies very heavily on processed snacks and foods, it will be different for baby, because you're trying to help them establish really strong, varied flavor interest at this age, and those foods steal the show. They're delicious. We all gravitate towards those foods naturally. So we like to take a balanced approach that, obviously, I think everything you said, we want to try and minimize those things for baby, but the value of sharing a bite of your fajitas with baby, or your your lasagna that you're eating, or even a bite of pie that grandma made for somebody's birthday, tends to outweigh the downsides of baby being exposed to those flavors. And we know that if the very basic bottom of things, that it's not unsafe for baby.
And I'm seeing in the chat questions for different seasonings. So specifically, are there any seasonings or herbs that you recommend? And if I had to guess, the answer would be all of them, right?
All of them.
Okay.
All
Great.
of them. All the ones that you use at home are fine.
And then
Yeah.
why no honey before the age of 1?
Honey has a higher than other foods chance of containing infant botulism spores. So there are certain foods that carry a higher risk than other foods of making babies sick. Honey is one of those foods, and infant botulism has an oversized impact on infants below the age of 12 months. I've worked with a handful of infants who had infant botulism. It is an emergency. It is a hospitalized situation where baby deteriorates fast. It's a sort of illness that you do not want baby to get. And so the risk is just high enough that it's not worth taking it. It's just better to wait till after 12 months. A similar thing goes for things like sushi, raw meats, raw dairy, any of that stuff, undercooked meats and fish. It's not that baby cannot be served those things. It's just that the risk is so high, it doesn't make any sense for us to do that. It's better to just wait until after around 12 months, even closer to 2, because the immune system of the baby is maturing over that time, and they are less likely to develop really dangerous side effects if they did pick up a foodborne illness from those foods once they're a little bit older.
Got it. I'm seeing the chat, everyone. I'm going to do my best to answer all of your questions, but the majority of them are about allergies. So I just want to make sure we're spending a significant amount of time there. I guess quickly, sorry, before we move on, somebody's just asking about spicy food when it comes to seasoning.
Yeah, you can absolutely serve spicy foods to your baby. Veronica said it, all those spices that you eat and enjoy are great to share with baby. When it comes to spicy foods, we recommend low and slow. So you don't want to overwhelm baby with a high spice food with a big mouthful right at first. So offering a tiny taste on a finger or a little lick of something rather than letting them cram a whole piece of something really spicy is a great way for them to just slowly start to get used to that. Babies will sometimes cry at first if it's too spicy, but that doesn't necessarily mean they don't like it. It's just overwhelms them. So serving it with a little water or a cooling food like yogurt or fruit can sometimes help balance that out. And it's really interesting to watch babies do this sort of like approach, avoid, dance with really spicy foods where they might like fuss and cry, but then go back again and try it again and then be like, oh, no.
You can
But
do that with a lemon too. It's adorable.
That's what
totally,
I was
yeah.
thinking of,
Yeah.
a lemon or lime. Yeah,
Yeah.
And the longer
exactly.
you serve them, babies sometimes, I mean, it's wild how high babies' spice tolerance can get pretty young, where you can see toddlers who really enjoy spicy foods that a lot of adults won't eat.
That is awesome.
Amazing.
My son actually, my 4-year-old actually loves spicy stuff, and I attribute it. We did a nanny share for a really long time for like 2 years, and so the other mom and I and dad would switch off cooking foods, and our child was just exposed to a lot of different things in different households. She did a lot of spicy foods, and now my toddler loves spicy food. So also like just a tip as a fellow parent, if you are intimidated by what to cook or all the meals you have to prepare and you have a friend in a similar stage as you, it's great to do meal prep together and expose your kid to different things that your households offer. So that's just a tip I love to share. Now, without further ado, allergies. So, how can parents introduce allergens safely and confidently? We'll start there and then we'll get more granular as we go.
Kary, do you want to start with this one?
Sure. Yeah. So we know from the research that introducing allergens early and often is important. So this is a big shift. If anybody has an older child who maybe started solids even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, you'll have heard something very different, which was wait on the common allergens until at least a year. And in some cases, for babies and children who are considered high risk, they would say wait until 2 or 3 years
2
old.
years.
Yeah, the research has completely flipped that on its head and is really solidly in favor of introducing common allergens as soon as babies start solids. They don't have to be the first or the second foods baby eats, but within the first few weeks, you do want to start introducing common allergens. And just like the spicy foods, low and slow is a helpful way to start, because we know that allergies can sometimes be dose dependent, which means that if baby is eating a lot of that food at once, they're more likely to have a very big allergic response versus a few small bites of that food. So our allergist recommends starting with just one small little taste or one small little bite, giving them a couple hours to watch for signs and symptoms of an allergy. And we have a really beautiful article with great, very clear pictures on our website and in our app that describes what food allergy symptoms will look like, as well as shows pictures of allergies on different skin color babies so that you can see what to look out for. And then if you are not seeing any signs of an allergy at that point, you would go ahead and either offer a little bit more a couple hours later, or you can wait till the next day. So she likes to do it 3 times in a row, which could be 3 times in one day, or it could be over 3 days. So if you're doing it in one day, give a couple hours between. If you're doing it over 3 days, you just up the amount little by little. But as baby is exploring those
Hello.
Mhm.
The realities of parenting.
Reality.
Veronica, quick question for you. They say, don't introduce multiple allergens at the same time because you don't necessarily know then if you have a potential reaction, what you're reacting to. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
One at a time, until you've done that 3-day or that 3 trial period. So you don't want to do like one allergen and then the second time a different one that you've never offered before and then go back to the first one. You want to do 3 tries of that one allergen first.
Yeah. And then we will send the resource Kary was talking about how to visibly see different types of reactions and what to look out for. But Kary, it looked like you had something to add.
Just a couple like small things in addition to that. One is that there are a subset of babies who are considered to be at high risk for developing later food allergies. So really, truly, that's a very small things you're going to look for. One is just that baby has severe eczema. That's the primary thing that predisposes a baby for developing a food allergy. So if your baby has severe eczema, the medical community is now recommending start by talking to your doctor, but those babies, the research shows, tend to need to start allergens, not all foods, but just those allergens even earlier, and in some cases as early as around 4 months old with those common allergens, small amounts of them. Severe eczema, and there's also if your baby has a pre-existing food allergy, although it's usually very hard to know that if you have a 4-month-old or a 5-month-old or even a 6-month-old, because you're not usually introducing a lot of foods. So those are the two things that would predispose you to being in that high risk category. And then somebody else asked this, I saw it in the chat about like, so I said introduce them early and often. And so one of the things that our allergist says is those allergens, per the research, need to stay in the diet on repeat once you introduce them in order to maximize the prevention of developing an allergy. And in her recommendation, that's twice a week for all of those common food allergies, which can be kind of daunting. Somebody was like, what about Brazil nuts and hazelnuts and things that you don't normally serve? So her recommendation is to create like, if you can, buy mixed nuts and create a mixed nut butter that you can just put on things, put a little scoop into oatmeal or different things like that, that covers, once you have introduced all of them individually, that covers those nuts. So you don't have to try and serve Brazil nuts and peanuts and almonds and cashews and everything else on repeat, but you're just covering all of those.
That's a great tip.
Sounds delicious.
And it is delicious. Yeah, exactly. It's good in your own oatmeal or on toast or something like that, in yogurt.
Kary, you usually do this for us, but I think I've learned from you because we're getting a lot of questions of what are the 9 allergens. So I'm going to test myself.
Yeah,
Milk,
do it.
eggs, peanuts, tree nuts, fish, shellfish, wheat, soy, sesame.
Woo! You nailed
it.
You did it.
Okay, awesome. And somebody's saying my baby is barely swallowing food, just exploring. Is putting in mouth but not swallowing enough to rule out allergies, or just need to wait till he starts swallowing more to know? Great question. Oops, my pen.
No, that's definitely a great start. And if they're most likely swallowing trace amounts, small amounts of that food, especially again, if you're thinking about the nuts. Most of the time we're serving those as nut butters. It's hard to get every bit of that out of the mouth. Most likely some of that is making its way to baby's gut. When it comes to like eggs or things like that, you can bake those into things or mash the yolk and the whites into something more mashed and pureed, which can make it more likely that baby again will eat a small amount of it. Another strategy that we love that our allergist recommends is just serving a tiny paste of it or a bit of it on your finger, so that you can sort of put it in baby's mouth and baby can suck on your finger, which sort of increases the likelihood of, oh, hold on.
No worries. She'll come back and answer and finish that sentence. But quick question, Veronica, eczema versus allergies. Is eczema and allergies connected? If you have eczema, are you more likely then to have allergies?
Yes. I'm not, and I believe, Kary, you'd be, kind of more up on the current research there in terms of eczema. But yes, a lot of the patients that I see that have allergies also started off with eczema as babies.
Okay. Yeah, so eczema, especially severe eczema, opens the skin up. So the way our allergist has described this, and I'm not an allergist, but I've worked with her now for several years, and she is one of the best, I think, in the world, is just that when you have all of these open wounds with eczema, those allergens are oftentimes then being absorbed. And so your baby is being exposed to these allergens through their skin, which isn't protective against developing a later allergy. It actually predisposes you for developing a later food allergy when that food gets into your gut, versus being introduced to that food allergen through the GI system, through the gut. So babies that have severe eczema are more at risk for having food allergies. And we often recommend talking to your pediatrician first if you're going to start solids, and asking for a referral to a pediatric allergist early before you even get started, just for a little bit of guidance in case a food allergy should present itself.
I want to double down on this just to make sure we're really clear. How often do we give a baby a new food? On the app, which I'm assuming you're referring to Solid Starts, it says usually 3 foods together. Is that okay? Like non-allergens are okay to give together before
Yeah, we don't necessarily recommend giving three foods. It's not like you should be giving three foods at a time, but it is also perfectly fine to give three foods at once as long as they're not a common allergen. So just like Veronica said, you don't want to be serving wheat and peanut butter together for the first time when you've never introduced either one to baby. But once you have introduced, say, peanut butter, and you know that you've watched baby those 3 times and they don't have a reaction, you could introduce wheat with peanut butter together, because wheat now is one that is the new one you're adding in. You also can introduce a common allergen at the same time as a non-common allergen. So you could potentially on Tuesday introduce banana and dairy yogurt at the same time, because if baby has an allergic reaction, you'd be pretty confident it was the dairy and not the banana, because banana is not considered a common food allergen. So there's no reason to introduce just one food at a time if it's not a common allergen, unless you feel like baby is so sensitive that it's important for you to sort of track and watch for symptoms of GI upset or any sort of difficulty with that food.
Got it. Time of day. So a lot of people are asking, is morning best? Anything to say there of why morning would be best, I guess.
Yeah, that we recommend morning only because that gives you all day to get into the doctor's office should you
Yep.
have some sort of a reaction. It is perfectly fine to do dinners. I introduced a lot of my new foods for my first daughter at dinner time because I worked all day and that was when I had the time to do
Of
it.
course.
But she didn't have any signs and symptoms of being predisposed to allergy. And so I wasn't really worried about that, especially for those common allergens. Introducing them in the morning is helpful again. So you have the chance to get to the doctor or to the hospital if you should need to. But it's not necessary, especially for the non-common allergens, to do that.
Got it. And somebody's just a little bit stressed out that they're not introducing the allergens in the proper timeline. I heard you say that the earlier, the better, but is there an age where you should have definitely introduced all allergens?
What we know is that the risk of developing a later food allergy decreases if you introduce them early and often, especially between 6 and 9 months. Like up to 12 months is really that window. That does not mean that if you introduce a food after 12 months that's a common allergen, that baby will have a reaction to it. A lot of times your baby won't. It's just that we know that the risk of food allergies are reduced by that early and consistent introduction. So there are so many things that I didn't realize were supposed to be done in a certain time frame or timeline as a parent. And it doesn't necessarily mean there's going to be any sort of problem for your baby. It just puts you at a slightly higher risk. So keeping that in mind, you might be more ready than somebody else to respond if your child is having a reaction, knowing that you've waited a bit longer. But it doesn't mean that you failed. It doesn't mean that now they're definitely going to have an allergy to that food.
Got it. That sounds good. Veronica, when it comes to how much milk the baby should be consuming when starting solids, how do you know that you're giving enough, and will the milk intake decrease when solids are introduced?
Yes, that's a great question. So before the age of 1, we usually recommend that we would give breast milk or formula first, and then have, offer food second. So in terms of how much milk, every baby is going to be different. But it is important, like, technically that all of the nutrition should be coming from
Oh, yeah. Veronica just unmute. I think Adam muted us all, but I'm sorry that
yes,
baby's crying.
yes. And so, yes, breast milk or formula is still like the main source of nutrition. And, there really is not an amount that we should be aiming for. If we're breastfeeding, we really don't know how much milk they're getting. But it is important that after 12 months, then we switch from offering that milk first, then we start with solids. And there are some babies at 12 months that are eating 3 full meals a day plus snacks. And there's some babies that might only be eating 2 full meals. So every child is different. And it's really important to after that 12-month period, we're not focusing on the milk or the breast milk as much. Breastfeeding is still recommended, but we are offering solids first.
And then what's the schedule that you should be giving your baby the solids and then also breast milk or formula? Does it matter as long as they're being exposed, or should you have a very strict schedule?
I think Kary, Solid Starts has really beautiful schedules depending on
We
like
worked
different
hard on
months.
those.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so the reality is when baby is 6 months, 7 months old, they don't even know yet that food at the table will fill their belly and fill them up. So they're not coming to the table hungry and ready to eat. They're coming to the table, like Veronica said, ready to explore in the same way they'd explore a toy. So they pick up a toy and they put it in their mouth, they pick up the food, they put it in their mouth, but it doesn't yet connect that this is food that fills my belly. So we're really not expecting there to be any change to your normal breast or bottle feeding schedule right at first. So what we want to aim for is fitting in a table meal at a time when your baby is calm, alert, awake, not too tired. They don't even have to be hungry at those first few meals. We actually, in fact, don't want them to be super hungry at those first few meals, because that will frustrate a baby who doesn't realize that they can chew and eat this food or swallow this food and get it into their belly to fill them up. So we recommend you give a breast or a bottle feed around 30 minutes to an hour before coming to the table. Even 20 minutes before coming to the table is fine, so that baby's not particularly hungry and they're just getting the chance to explore at first. And so we have a variety of sample schedules in our app and on our website that help show people what this could look like, again, with a morning meal at the table or an afternoon meal at the table, fitting it in with the rest of their meals. We also like to let families know that right at first, it is okay to skip a day if your baby is teething, if your baby's sick, if your baby is having a terrible day, or you have a particularly busy day where you're running all around and you just don't get to it. It is not a big deal to not bring them to the table at all, because like Veronica said, they're getting their nutritional needs met through breast milk and formula at this age. Those solids are for them to explore and learn how to be at the table and learn how to eat, not necessarily to fill their belly.
Got it. That makes complete sense. If I want to just quickly go back to allergies, because we're getting a lot of the same question. If you already have, or your family has an allergy, so you as the parent have an allergy, is your baby more likely to also have an allergy? Are they connected?
So we used to think that that was one of the common risk factors that predisposed a baby to developing a later food allergy, was a parent or a sibling who had a pre-existing food allergy. The research actually isn't super strong to support that. Like I said, really the only two things that we're looking at are severe eczema or whether or not baby has a pre-existing food allergy. So you having a food allergy or a sibling of your child having a pre-existing food allergy isn't necessarily a sign that your baby is going to have a food allergy. Of course, you can be extra cautious and talk to your doctor about it, but based on the research, that does not necessarily predispose them to a higher risk.
Got it. And then Veronica, do you offer water with solids, or why are we told no water for babies?
You absolutely can offer a little bit of water. We don't want them to fill up on water, and we don't want their stomach, like the water, to take the space of food or milk. That's going to offer more nutrition. The water is more for exposure, more for them to, get a little bit of hydration. They technically should be getting all of their hydration from breast milk or formula. As they get a little bit older, or if it's like a really hot month, and the water could provide some hydration, but really it's just at the table for exposure, that open cup.
Got it. And I'm seeing a lot of questions also about which vessel or bottle do we offer water in, or cup. Download the Auggie app, go into our marketplace. Every bottle or cup there is recommended and tested by real parents, so you can see what everyone's saying. Okay. Anything to add on allergies before we move on? I'm seeing questions on like anaphylactic, when to call the doctor. Do
So
we want to? Yeah.
That article, I think you will find very helpful if you're feeling anxious about allergies. Go in and read the article. It gives you the signs and symptoms to look for. The beautiful thing about food allergies is that they split it into mild allergic reactions and severe allergic reactions. There's not a middle, medium allergic reaction. It's sort of pretty definitive. If your baby has just a few small hives or a little bit of a red patch, a little bit of itchy skin, something like that, that's considered a mild allergic reaction. It's not something that is necessarily an emergency. But if it affects, so really the way it helps me to understand it is that there are sort of three systems, body systems that get affected by allergies. You can have skin, which is usually like hives or itchy red skin, swollen skin. You can have GI issues, so vomiting, diarrhea, stomach upset, and you can have respiratory symptoms. So babies having trouble breathing, they're wheezing, they're seeming like they're swelling in their face or their throat, and they're not able to breathe well. If their symptoms are affecting two different systems, that's a severe allergic reaction. I don't care if it's two small hives and a little bit of swelling, or two small hives and throwing up, that's two systems. You actually want to call emergency services. So
Okay.
if you are at all concerned or baby seems to be getting worse and you're not sure, it does not hurt to call emergency services. You're not going to err on the side of caution and be like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. Like even if it's nothing, it's better to err on that side than it is, because it's really easy to get emergency help once they're there. Tell them to bring an EpiPen, tell them that you believe they're having an allergic reaction, and then they can get there and help you. And if it's nothing, it's nothing. They pat you on the back and tell you, thank you for calling, and then they leave. So better to be overly cautious if you're worried about it.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Okay, unless Veronica, you have anything to add on allergies, and
I think that's great. I
okay,
think
if
that's great. And I
anybody,
can't wait to read that article as well.
and maybe we can share that article in the event follow-up, Kary. Um, if you have specific allergy questions that we didn't answer, put them in the chat now, and I'll do my best to circle back on them. If a baby has an allergy, is the second and subsequent exposure likely to be more severe?
Yeah, actually, it can get worse over time, which is why you want to talk to a doctor and work with a pediatric allergist. We also know that the food allergies can go away with repeat exposure under the guidance of a medical provider. So that's actually one way to cure a food allergy, is to basically do an immune therapy where you get exposed to trace amounts of that allergen, and then you slowly start to increase that allergen. But that is trace amounts with a doctor's supervision. This is not you just serving more and seeing, because the more you serve, usually allergies will get worse.
If it's a mild reaction, what do we do? Somebody's daughter had a slight hive reaction, it seems like, to eggs. Does she reintroduce them right away?
Talk to your doctor, take a picture, send it to your physician, ask them for their take on it. Usually you would not necessarily avoid that food, because again, the longer you wait to serve that food again, the more likely you are to develop a food allergy. You want to keep that food in consistently, but you want to get your doctor's approval. You want your doctor to know this has happened, and you want to keep an eye on it, because they may give you some recommendations for how to go about doing that.
Perfect answer. Okay, stress-free meal times. We hear about it all the time in the community. Parents are stressed, kids then get stressed. Feeding feels stressful. What are strategies that truly help? And Veronica, maybe you'll kick us off.
Yes, this is a big one, and one that I deal with all the time with parents that I work with. So I think one thing that I always talk about is lowering our expectations in terms of everything, how long we're expecting our kids to sit for, or we cooked for, we spent so long cooking and our kids didn't want to eat anything. And that, that really can weigh on parents. So really managing our own expectations is the first thing. And then the second thing I will say as a dietitian is, just looking at the food environment, how you're serving the food if a baby gets a plate full of food and all of these different foods they have never tried before, it may be overwhelming. It may cause them to want to push the food away. I don't want that. What is this? It's too much. So I always tell parents to start small. And even, as we're first starting solids, starting with, 3 pieces of food on their plate or on their tray at a time. And so that's a big one, is how we serve the food, and also that environment piece. I find as kids get older, what helps them feel really comfortable is the interaction. So perhaps seeing these foods away from the table, being in a toddler tower and being beside you when you're prepping. Maybe they have a little, child safe knife and a cutting board, and they're touching and interacting. They're more likely going to feel that they will feel more comfortable with these foods that they see if they're not seeing them at the table for the first time. So that can really help as you go into those, to that toddler stage, when kids aren't as accepting of new things, where that hesitation may come in. So that interaction, that environment is also really important.
Yes. And I feel like my energy with my definitely rubbed off on my son, and I was really anxious about choking and the gagging sound. Kary, can you talk about what's normal versus what's not, and maybe suggestions for other anxious parents?
There's so much anxiety about choking. That's a very, very common one. I think a couple things to keep in mind are that the research shows us that babies under the age of 12 months are more likely to choke and have a severe incident on non-food items. So these are stickers, toys, balloons, things that they find on the floor, things that are left, a bottle cap left on the table. Non-food items are a bigger risk to your child than food items at under the age of 12 months. After 12 months, it flips a little bit, but it's still neck and neck. It's very, very close. So parents have a lot of anxiety about food at the table, but the research shows us that the likelihood of baby choking on food while seated at the table, supervised, especially when the food is prepared in a way to be made safe for baby, so you can use the Solid Starts app to decide how to serve the food safely for your baby at any given age. If we are doing that, the risk of choking is extremely low. So our anxiety is up here, and it is oversized with what the risk actually is. Your baby was born to do this. We are designed to learn to eat solid foods. So they have all of the skills that they need, even at 6 months old, to learn how to eat solid foods. And in fact, your baby is equipped with some of the highest level of protective mechanisms that they will ever have between 6 and around 9 months old as they're learning to eat chewable foods. The research shows us that those mechanisms, those things that help protect them from choking, start to actually fade out to a certain extent. They do not go away. So if your baby is 9 months and older, it is not that those things are gone. It's just that they are not quite as protective as they were at 6 to 9 months. So a parent who says, I'm just going to wait till after 9 months or 12 months or 18 months to introduce solids, you're kicking the can and actually making baby wait for a time where they have a little bit less protection against choking. So those earlier introductions are actually some of the safest times to introduce these solid foods to baby, because they have, I call them a constellation of different things that help to reduce the risk of choking and help them as they learn to explore food and learn to chew.
And those choking devices that everyone gets sponsored ads from, do they actually work?
So they're not actually super well researched. We know that infant choking rescue, CPR and infant choking rescue, without those devices is the gold standard. So you do not want to rely on a device or buy a device and not learn infant choking rescue. That is the gold standard. Learn that, know that. And if you want to have one of those devices at home as well, that can maybe make you feel a little bit better about things. But we know that choking is extremely responsive to well-timed and well-performed choking first aid. So that's the gold standard.
Take a class. That's always my recommendation. And it's a great gift to get new parents or expecting parents who, may need it. Yes.
Can I also just say, I didn't get to this, but gagging. People get so concerned that gagging is choking or that gagging is going to lead to choking or that there is something wrong if baby is gagging at the table. The gag reflex is one of those protective mechanisms I was talking about. The gag reflex is not choking. It is something that helps to reduce the risk of choking, even though it looks scary, even though it doesn't feel good when you watch a baby gag. Most of the time, babies are not super perturbed by it. They don't even mind. Most babies will gag the teeth back out, then pick it up and go right back for it. Some babies will fuss or they'll cry a little bit, but usually if you stay calm and you tell them, yeah, I saw that. Yeah, that didn't feel good. I know. They'll calm right back down and then they will continue. Gagging naturally closes the airway. So physiologically, babies' airway closes as they gag, and the back of their throat and the back of their tongue starts squeezing and pushing things up and forward and out, which is why you tend to throw up when you gag. But anything that has made its way to the back of the mouth or throat gets pushed forward and out as the airway closes, which can frighten some parents because if airway is closing, baby can't breathe for a quick second or two as the body's working that food out. So it can look again like, oh, baby is really struggling, but it's actually exactly what we want baby to do so that whatever's back there can get safely out of mouth and then they can resume what they were doing.
And is a baby with a tongue tie at higher risk of choking?
It depends on what their function is. So I've been working with babies for a very, very long time. A tongue tie does not necessarily mean that baby will have oral motor deficits, and it does not necessarily predispose them for a higher risk of choking. There's no literature that actually looks at that carefully, so we don't fully know, but what I know is that the tongue has a lot of range of motion and movements to it, even when it's tied. So our tongue bunches, it spreads, it does lots of things that are not just moving forward and backwards, side to side. So if baby is appearing to struggle and they've been diagnosed with a tongue tie, that could be a clue that they might need more intervention. They may need some therapy, they may need their tongue clipped. But if they are not struggling and they've been diagnosed with a tongue tie, there's usually no need to intervene at that point because functionally they have the motion that they need and the skills that they need to do what they need to do, even with the tongue tie. So it's sort of, the long answer is nuanced. The short answer is no, it doesn't necessarily predispose them to more choking, but watch your baby and look for their specific skills.
And I want to be respectful of everyone's time. One suggestion that I give all of my new parent friends is to try to make it fun, to encourage your child to go to the grocery store with you, to say, hey, can you pick out a vegetable that's green that you want to try? There are so many little games that you can do, obviously not with such a little baby, but the earlier you introduce it and make mealtime enjoyable, the easier it does become. There were upwards of 400 questions, I believe, in the chat. We will circle back with content and event recap, a video, and we will do our best to get these questions answered when we follow up if we didn't answer yours. I just want to thank you, Veronica and Kary. You're both so knowledgeable in this space, and I really appreciate you showing up for this virtual event. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Lily. Thank you, Veronica.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.